Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. When was the last time a book made you squirm because the villain wasn't across the battlefield, but already inside your own head? Why do we despise certain fictional protagonists? Not because they're distant, unrelatable monsters, but because, with every page, they become a mirror we can't stand to look into. Today, on The Hidden Perspective, we go somewhere most people desperately avoid. The reasons why we hate protagonists in books like The Picture of Dorian Gray, Lolita, Crime and Punishment, or Notes from Underground. Not for their acts alone, but for the chilling reflection they cast of what's hiding inside us. These are the stories that start off making us almost root for the main character. The world misunderstands them. They're clever, maybe witty, a little broken, even sympathetic. But as the plot darkens, so does our discomfort. By the end, disgust replaces fascination. And yet, ask yourself, what changed? Did they become someone new, or merely reveal what was there all along? What if the reason we recoil is because we see a version of ourselves stripped of excuses, undressed of all polite justifications, exposed in the raw glare of honesty? The hidden psychological problem is projection fused with self-deception. We want to believe we are good, different, set apart from the monsters in fiction and history. But the truth these masterpieces expose is disturbing. Our morality is not ironclad. It is tissue paper thin, often glued together by circumstance and social surveillance. The protagonist's descent is simply a stage where our own inner negotiations, our rationalizations, jealousies, cravings, and resentments are enacted, only magnified and stripped of consequences. We fall into this mental trap because fiction is safe. We convince ourselves, I'm just reading a story. But the storytelling genius turns this safe arena into a psychological minefield. Consider Dorian Gray. What starts as innocent vanity slips into corruption until the boundary between charm and decay completely blurs. We want to admire his beauty, his wit, but slowly the rot crawls from the portrait into our own sense of self. And somewhere, in the half-hearted defense we muster for him, wasn't he under bad influence? Wasn't he a product of society? We realize it's our own appetite for excuses we're defending. Humbert, ostensibly the villain of Lolita, is seductive, unreliable, and horrifying. The trap is in how the prose itself seduces us. We're hypnotized by the language while morally appalled by the actions. Our dislike, by the end, isn't just for him, but for the versions of ourselves that can be lulled into sympathy for a monster by mere eloquence or a sob story. What these stories reveal about human nature is damning. We are irrationally capable of rooting for monsters, as long as they mask our own forbidden longings, our shameful desires, our hunger for power, or our petty grievances in pretty words or clever reasoning. We craft sophisticated excuses, not just to forgive them, but, subconsciously, to forgive ourselves. The underground man, with all his grievances and melancholic brilliance, is simply a raw nerve exposed. All the ways we justify our idleness, all the petty reasons we sabotage happiness, all the hidden darkness we suppress. We turn away not because the character is inhuman, but because he is too human, painfully, recognizably so. When the protagonist is finally revealed as irredeemable, we scramble to assert our difference. I would never do that, we say with relief. But if the story has done its job, a quiet, uncomfortable voice inside us whispers, but you recognize the urge. Deeper still is the uncomfortable truth. We rely on villains to draw the line between good and evil for us, and we instinctively yearn for protagonists whose flaws are just manageable enough to make us feel safe. But what happens when that safety net is cut away? When someone crosses the invisible line from flawed but redeemable to corrupt beyond hope? That's when we panic, not because evil has appeared, but because the border is closer to us than we want to admit. Most of our life is composed of lines we promise ourselves we'll never cross. But the greatest novels show us, inch by inch, motive by motive, how those lines dissolve in the heat of envy, loneliness, or self-justified ambition. What's monstrous isn't what people do when they're already lost, but how easily they can become lost, unnoticed. There's an additional layer few dare to confront. Our hatred of these protagonists is often a defensive maneuver against self-recognition. When we despise them most intensely, we're shoving away the unbearable thought that we, too, are stitched together by fragile stories we tell ourselves. That maybe, under different circumstances, surrounded by the same temptations or humiliations, we would make those same devastating choices. Our moral identity is a house of cards, shaped by external gaze, propped up by our selective memories, loosely held together by denial. Literature's darkest gift is to force us to see the fluidity of the self, to understand that we are not static saints or sinners, but shifting composites, sometimes noble, sometimes hideous, always unfinished. And perhaps most unnerving is this: the more passionately we hate these fictional mirrors, the more desperately we are trying to silence something ugly in ourselves. Why do we shudder at Dorian's decay, or Humbert's manipulation, or the underground man's misery? Because they refuse to play by the rules that let us sleep at night. They force us to confront the possibility, no, the inevitability, that our own empathy, our outrage, our virtue might be paper-thin veils barely hiding impulses we've never dared name. So here is the real horror, the secret these stories plant like seeds in your mind. The monsters we despise are only monsters as long as we can safely keep them in someone else's story. The minute we admit how close they are to home, we have to ask, when is the line crossed? Who draws it? And what if you woke up tomorrow to find you'd already stepped on the other side, justified by circumstance, blinded by loneliness, or simply exhausted by life? Maybe the books we hate are the books we need most. They don't just reveal what's possible in fiction, they warn us what's possible in ourselves. So the next time a novel makes you recoil from the protagonist, stop and ask, am I angry at what they did? Or am I terrified by how much, stripped of excuses, I might do the very same thing? In the end, it's not about loving or hating fictional monsters. It's about daring to look in the mirror and seeing what stares back without looking away. That's the hidden perspective.